How are you doing? I'm here hiding out in upstate New York in the mountains. I snuck up here a couple of days ago, got out of the heat. Um, Bit of a major kind of heat wave going on, especially down in the city right now, even though it's happening all over the world. But trying to escape it a little bit by coming up into the mountains here, and brought my bike, and I've been doing some biking and hiking, and what else rhymes with that? A bit of liking, bit of running, bit of swimming, trying to get it all in, along with the teaching and also some recording as well. Um, so I'm in a lovely little cabin here. It's very cute and tiny little hideaway, but there's actually great sound in here. Um, very nice. Um, but some of you may have seen an Instagram post I put up a few days ago from actually I was away last week also for a few days, and I I thought I'd get all arty and do a little video with my new Delrin flute down by the banks of the Delaware River, and in the process I took a tumble and went head over heels or arse over face, whatever you want to call it, and yeah, it was quite a ridiculous little stunt. But the flute survived. Yeah, no flutes were damaged in the making of that video, and it again was a kind of testament to this whole industry now, which is kind of making flutes out of other materials other than wood. So it was fine. I did play a bit of a tune when I finally got upright again, but a couple of people asked, would I show the flute up close, or at least indoors where maybe they could see it in more detail. So, it's a flute made by PolJez from Brittany, one of the leading Breton flute makers. Dear friend of mine. I I know Paul probably 30 years now, and I actually had a PolJez flute and loved it. Really loved it. There was an incredible kind of bang off it. It was a really great, big sounding flute. As is the case with PolJez flutes, they are very distinctive looking. He has a very unique key design. This is slightly different to the one that he has on his wooden flutes, and it's actually even more visionary. I'll explain all about that in a moment. But it is made of Delrin, polymer, plastic, resin, whatever you're having yourself, what people call it. I'm sure there's a correct name for each one of those, but the general term is a Delrin flute. So its main kind of addition to the, I suppose, arsenal of instruments out there would be that it's maintenance free. Like wooden instruments are very hard to look after. They're prone to changes in temperature, humidity, elements, conditions. They crack, they're split. You got to mind them, you got to oil them, you got to look after them. These are pretty maintenance free. You might have to maybe, kind of add a little bit of lubrication to the keys at times just to keep them nice and smooth, but there's no real maintenance as such. You don't have to oil them. Just run them under the tap and they're good to go. So I had really struggled with my wooden instruments. When I came to America 8 years ago, I was naive, and just didn't really know how severe the winters would be on the flutes. And first and foremost, they just changed because all of the moisture was sucked out of them, and the sound got very brittle during the winter months. And then the bore kind of shrunk because I wasn't taking care of it. And then the second year, the flutes cracked and split. So I did get them repaired, and they're definitely very, very close to how they used to be. But I'm kind of done with the maintenance. If I'm honest, like it's a lot of work, and I wanted something that might be just like less stressful. Something that you could pick up today and it would sound the same as it did yesterday, and just kind of know that if it didn't, that it wasn't the flute's fault, that it was down to me. So I contacted Paul about 3 years ago with a view to getting a Keyed Delrin flute, and this is the fruits of his labour. So he came up with the body of the flute very quickly. He's been making Delrin flutes, keyless ones, for quite a while. And I liked the fact that in those instruments, he didn't try to make them look like a wooden flute. As you can see, there are no rings or bands, because this is a 4-piece flute. It does come apart, and traditionally each section would have a silver ring around the top there, which was primarily there to protect the slightly narrower piece of wood. But because this is Delrin, it doesn't need that added protection. And rather than Paul kind of just going with a traditional look, he embraced the whole sleek contemporary kind of design, and it just looks like one beautiful piece of Delrin. But it is there. You've got your foot joint, your centerpiece, the barrel, the head joint. It has a tune and slide as well, and a little bit of bling on the top there. It's got 6 keys. I have the E flat turned away from me there. Rarely do you get the opportunity to play an E flat note in the majority of Irish tunes. And traditionally, that key would have been very useful in bringing the E note into pitch or increasing the volume of it, because in the early 1800s instruments in particular, the E was always slightly flat and it was kind of quieter than the others. So venting, as we call it, with the D sharp key would correct that. But modern flutes, there again, makers have come up with a design and measurements that have now corrected that. So even if you're playing a keyless flute all the way down through the scale, everything should be balanced and in tune. But so I have the key, if I'm using the E flat, it's there, and I do rest my pinky under it, but so it's not in the way, but for some reason I get it completely out of the way, and I turn it there and I line it up with the long F key, and that way from the front it kind of looks like there's another little bit of bling there, and you get to see it, because it's all about giving, isn't sharing. There you go. So that's the story with the key there, but there is a great belt off it. I'll like, there's your D, and there is some whack off the E flat. Pity that note isn't actually more prevalent in the tunes. Anyway, it's a really lovely instrument. The other distinguishing feature, the main one, I kind of hinted at it earlier, this key work. If you look at it, it almost appears that the keys are magically floating there on the body of the flute, because there are no uprights or blocks or pins or mountings that would normally be there. And that's an incredible departure, I think, and a very, very sleek design too. So the workings of the key are all kind of built into the key itself. The key is kind of hollow. It's got the spring system, the same as every other flute would have, or even probably oboes or clarinets. But like I say, there's nothing on the outside of the key. It's all built into it. So you see there the uprights which keep the key in place when you're moving it up and down. They're kind of out of the way. It's very nice. The action on the keys, I don't know if it's a consequence of this new design or not, or whether it's just Paul has just a lovely tension on the springs. But they really work with you when you're not alone just using them to access particular notes. But if you were like on a C natural or an F natural especially, there's very little you can do to ornament those notes. So that spring allows you to kind of utilize them in a different way and almost emulate a roll. So you hear that kind of bounce back, and that's all to do with the touch and the tension that's on the key. You can get it to growl like that, which is similar to the execution of an ornament or a roll. So that's nice. And on the Fs, there's such a great voicing that you can cran them and get nice ornaments off of those too. Same with the long one. Just access it and do your dance then. I think the real bonus for me was discovering that there's an incredible vibration, or I when you play the flute, the instrument does vibrate or pulsate under the fingers really, really well. So that if, for instance, you were in a situation where maybe you couldn't hear yourself the way that you would like in a loud session, or maybe even at a gig that you're being overpowered at with the sound system or whatever, you'll feel it. You'll feel that you're making the connection, and the sound waves just go through the flute so well, and the air goes through the flute in such a way that, like I say, it just kind of bubbles away under the fingers. So that's a nice added little bit of kind of security there. It is very balanced. So if I do that in certain tunes, we like to just reference the low D, pop down to the low D. Like it's there with this instrument without you having to or adjust your embouchure or give it more air or any of those things. You can do that if you want to really make a feature of the hard D, but just to kind of use it as a reference point, bang, bang, bang in the middle, it's there, and it's nice. It's nice to know that that's the case. I'll play a bit of a tune just to give you an idea maybe of how it sounds across a range of notes. Oh, why didn't I think about what I would play? I don't know, it just feels very safe, and that's not really a great word or a good description, but it is ticking a lot of boxes in terms of allowing you to do with the notes what you want to do without really having to carve out every single phrase. So, yeah. The man himself, PolJez Delrin, as I said, from Brittany. Some of you might know Paul through either his instruments or his musicianship. He's a wonderful flute player. Plays a whole range of things, but primarily flute. He's also a wonderful inventor, as I've told you. He's always trying to come up with new things, not just with flutes. He's that typical instrument maker, wacky inventor, eccentric type. Great character, great fun. Love meeting up with Paul and Magali socially. They come to Ireland a lot, and I am lucky enough to go to Brittany quite often, and usually see them on those trips. So Paul sent this flute to Ennis 3 weeks ago. I took delivery of it there and fell in love with it straight away. And that's unusual. Like, it's usually, it takes a lot of playing and a lot of readjusting to get really kind of to grips with a new instrument. This felt good straight away. I'm still wanting to do certain things with it that I would do with my Grinter flute, or even like I have a beautiful Allwell 6-key Cocos wood flute as well, which again needs to be played differently to the Grinters. Have a beautiful windward keyless flute. They're all Ds. Have a really nice F made by Geert Lejeune. And they just all need to be kind of played differently. This is as close to my Grinter as any of the others. So I do enjoy that aspect of it as well, in that I'm not totally kind of floundering. So I got this and contacted Paul straight away. Said, yeah, this is a keeper. I'm holding on to this. And we were chatting then about maybe working on a couple of other things, flute related. Got back to the States and discovered that Paul had been in a pretty bad motorbike accident. And that was 3 weeks ago. And he's just home from hospital, I found out today. So that's great news. But it's an awfully long road back to full recovery and full fitness for PolJez Delrin. So if you know Paul through any of those avenues I mentioned, whether it be socially, professionally, any of that stuff, send him a little message and give him a little bit of a G up. I'm sure he'd appreciate it massively. And yeah, so yeah, I want him back. We need to get more of these flutes out there. So hurry on back. And wishing him all the best. I'll play one more little tune and then I'll leave it at that. And thanks to those of you that messaged inquiring about this lovely new instrument. Yeah, it's definitely ticking a lot more boxes than I even thought it would. So, tune. That's that one again. I'll do something else. What would be a good one to show up? There you go. Okay, Paul, talk to you soon. Wishing you all the best. Thanks a million. Great instrument.